football music here. That one means it's time to talk Giants. It is the Manchild Show with Boy Green Digital, or at MC Show Digital, our new fancy name. Welcome aboard week one. We're diving right into some Giants football news today. We're going to talk a little bit about Minicamp. Boy Green, good morning, man. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome, Lerch. It's a new world. We got to get used to doing this permanently here moving forward, but it's a real treat, and can't wait for everything this new world's going to bring us.
I feel like I should be like pixelating or something, but no. I mean, the picture is solid. Everything is fantastic. So far, so good. All right, let's talk some Giants football. Let's bring in our Giants insider from Big Blue View. You heard him on the radio for years with us. He's back in the digital world. Ed Valentine. Ed, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys? I can actually see you.
Oh my
wow!
God.
You have faces.
Is it better or worse, Ed? I don't know.
That's a good
is
point.
It better or worse?
Don't make me. Don't make me.
Okay, no, it's okay. Ed. You don't have to.
Yeah, well, I could ask you guys the same thing. So let's just leave that one alone.
Don't make me.
Okay. But if we see the grandkids running around in the background, Ed, because we always used to talk about them. Hey, I'm good with that. Let them run around a little. I like a little video, excitement sometimes in the background.
It works. Yeah, they're not here today, but right. but sometimes you'll get them.
All right, let's talk some Giants minicamp, because minicamp is now over for the Giants, and I wanted to get into some of the storylines. Let's start at the top and work our way down. The quarterback battle, or is it even a battle? We've got Russell Wilson. We've got Jackson Dart, the draft pick. We've got Jameson Winston. We've even got Tommy DeVito still on this roster. Let's talk about how the Giants are thinking about this quarterback room here coming out of minicamp.
Well, they are thinking, and they have been thinking since day one, that Russell Wilson is their starting quarterback. They paid him that way. They paid Jameis Winston like a backup. His 2-year contract is for less money than Russell Wilson's 1-year deal. So that tells you how they're thinking about that situation. Now, whether or not there should be a competition between the two veterans is a different thing. Greg Cosell, longtime NFL analyst who knows quarterback play really, really well, came out the other day and said that he thinks it should be an open competition between the two. He loves what Winston can do. And I would not have had a big problem had the Giants simply signed Winston, and called it a day, and then drafted a quarterback. But they didn't do that. They're not looking at it like a competition. They're looking at it like Russell Wilson to Jackson Dart transition whenever that happens, whether that's at some point this year, whether it's in an ideal world, it would be next year, that Jackson Dart would take over. But they're looking at Jameis Winston as a backup.
Ed, there are some people, you mentioned the Jackson Dart plan. I would agree with that. If I was running the operation, he probably doesn't see the field at all this year when we evaluate that story next year. But there's been some chatter in the streets that screw Russell Wilson, screw Jameis Winston. What about Jackson Dart?
Get to the rookie,
right from the get-go? And I've been like, wait, what? What did we do all this for? So I ask you, Ed, have you heard any of that chatter, and what do you make of it?
Well, I saw Mark Schlereth's take on the idea that the Giants should cut Russell Wilson and start Jackson Dart from day one. And I wrote this, and I'll say it. Mark Schlereth's take stinks. All right. and of course we know that Schlereth's nickname is Stink. But look, I talked to Jordan Palmer, who's a great quarterback coach, is Josh Allen's quarterback's coach, knows Brian Daboll really, really well, because they, obviously they work together with Josh Allen in Buffalo. Talked to Matt Waldman, who's of the rookie scouting portfolio. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Matt's work, but he's a tremendous quarterback skill position analyst, and both of them love the Giants quarterback room. They love the way that this has been set up. I like the way this has been set up. Look, I don't know what version of Russell Wilson the Giants are going to get. I don't know how much better Russell Wilson is than Daniel Jones. I know that he's better. Okay. I know that they've improved at the position. Is it enough to win them more than 6 or 7 games? I don't know. But what I do know, and Jordan Palmer said, look, you can say what you want about Russell Wilson. One thing about Russell Wilson is he's a pro. He approaches his job the right way. He will help Jackson Dart. He will teach Jackson Dart. And for me, the best setup in the world for these guys is to have somebody to learn from. Whether Russell Wilson, if the Giants go 0-4, maybe Jackson Dart starts week 5. Who knows? If they're 2-11, maybe he plays the last 3 or 4 games. I don't know. If they're in contention for a playoff spot, maybe Russell Wilson plays all year long. Although, Kurt Warner thought he should probably still keep playing when he had the Giants in playoff contention way back in 2004. But the room is set up very, very well for Jackson Dart to learn. You've got Russell Wilson, who's won Super Bowls, has been in the league 13, 14 years. You've got Jameis Winston, who was a former number 1 overall pick, who has had ups and downs, like crazy roller coaster style ups and downs in the NFL, and has become a guy that everybody loves as a teammate and can be a big help to Jackson Dart as well. So the idea that the Giants should just cut bait on Russell Wilson and hand the job to Jackson Dart is, to me, it's off base for a lot of reasons.
And when you look at this overall quarterback room, I agree with what others have said about loving the construct of the room. Having all these veterans creates this nice padding between the real world and where Jackson Dart is, where he, in theory, has all the comfortability to develop at his own pace because of the other guys above him. If there is an injury, he doesn't have to be forced out there early on paper. Here's my fear, Ed, and I'm curious if you guys in Giants Nation have a similar fear. What's in the best interest of Jackson Dart and what is in the best interest of Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen may not be the same timeline. Those guys, according to all the people on the outside, are on the hot seat. So if we're getting to a certain point, instead of doing what's best for Jackson Dart long-term in 10 years, they're like, yeah, that's nice. But what about right now? Because depending on what we do here, we may not have a job soon. Is there any fear that there will be a conflict of interest on what's best for Jackson Dart and what's best for the job security of one Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen with decision-making as it pertains to one Jackson Dart?
I absolutely think that that's a good point, and that is something to watch. It's that kind of a deal where we all know what the Giants did to Daniel Jones. Now, look, Daniel Jones is a limited quarterback in a lot of ways. Had the really good 2022 season, but even that wasn't what you would call a prolific season. But John Mara, he said, we did everything possible to screw this kid up. They fired the head coach after the first year. They brought in a head coach who really didn't help the young quarterback develop. All he said is, basically he said, I'm going to cut your fingers off if you keep turning over the football, and so he stopped turning over the football, but at the same time, he also stopped making plays, because he was afraid to take any chances. And I don't think he ever overcame that. So, 3 head coaches, 2 general managers, probably a half a dozen offensive coordinators, horrible offensive lines, all of that. And the last thing on earth you want to do to Jackson Dart is put him on that merry-go-round after this year. That's the last thing you want to do. I've heard people say, well, if the Giants were going to keep Brian Daboll and keep Joe Schoen and draft a quarterback, they should have also guaranteed Brian Daboll the 2026 season. And I don't know, because at some point you have to look at 9-25 over the last 2 years. And if they win 4 games again, then it's hard to justify keeping him. But, you're right about the timeline, because let's say that they're 1-8, 2-7, whatever that, whatever. And it comes to a point where Brian Daboll says, I'm going to get fired, and the only shot that I have is if Jackson Dart can show that we made the right pick at quarterback, and we can show that we know how to find a quarterback, and that it looks like he has a future. Maybe he won't be ready by week 9 or week 10. Maybe he'll be ready by week 5. Who knows? But you're right. There might come a point in time where they know, and he's not really ready. We probably shouldn't do this. But the only chance I've got to keep my job is to put him on the field and show that he could be our future quarterback. So there is that concern. It's part of why it was tricky for the Giants to bring Brian Daboll back. Because you brought Daboll back, and at the same time you said, we need to win more games, but our biggest offseason priority is finding our quarterback of the future. And those two things may not be necessarily things that work together, especially with the brutal schedule that the Giants have this year. So it's tough, and who's going to blame Brian Daboll if he throws Jackson Dart out there knowing that it's the only chance he's got to stay as an NFL head coach?
All right, you're watching at MC Show Digital. Hey, if you like our video, please click the little like thing and subscribe as well. We can use some more subscribers as we get rocking and rolling here in the digital world. Ed Valentine is our guest from Big Blue View. He's our Giants insider. We're talking Giants minicamp. All right, let's get away from the quarterback thing for now. I like patience and continuity, just like you, Ed. Let's talk about some exciting positions on this Giants squad, including their number 1 draft pick, or the first round draft pick, I should say, Abdul Carter, who apparently looked fantastic. I wonder if he's going to help free up Brian Burns, and if those two are going to complement each other well in this Giants defense. Give me your early take on that.
Oh, Abdul Carter looks terrific. Talk to Andre Patterson, who's the defensive line coach for the Giants, veteran defensive line coach, isn't directly Carter's position coach, but does do some work with Carter. And he said that Carter has something that in 40 years of coaching, he's only seen one other player ever come into the NFL with, which is a complete understanding of how to rush the passer, of how to manipulate, how to set up an offensive lineman, how to take advantage of whatever the offensive lineman does. So a lot to like about Carter. But the one thing, I saw clips online of, the Giants pass rush is going to be monstrous and this and that. Everybody has to remember that these practices are in shorts and T-shirts, and all offensive linemen can basically do is touch these guys. If the defensive lineman starts to win, basically all the offensive linemen can do is wave bye-bye. So it's not a true picture. And yet you have to be excited about Abdul Carter. You have to be excited about that Giants front seven, because just looking at the personnel, it should be very, very good. And we're all looking forward to how defensive coordinator Shane Bowen is actually going to figure out how to get all these pieces on the field.
Ed, what jersey number did Abdul Carter end up with? Not Phil Simms, not Lawrence Taylor. That one didn't work out. Where did he end up?
51.
Ah, okay, great.
51.
I'm glad he found one. I was getting a little concerned for him after the first couple of waves there.
Yeah, it's that's a whole can of worms that honestly, the Giants never should have opened up that can of worms a year ago by giving number 1 to Malik Nabers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by doing that, they did. They opened the whole thing up to that discussion. Hey, let's talk a little bit about the cornerback position. That's one that really intrigues me. The Giants went out and got Paulson Adebo. They've got Deonte Banks there, who they're hoping will continue to develop. He's been a bit spotty. And you got Drew Phillips out there as well. Talk to me about where the Giants are at here with the corners, because that was a position last year I came in with great concern. Should there be less concern this year, Ed, with the group that they have?
Well, I look at it this way. a year ago, we came into the season with the Giants hoping, praying. I'm not sure they thought he could, but they were kind of fingers crossed that Tay Banks could hold up adequately as their number one corner. Okay. Obviously, we know that didn't go well. There's maturity issues, and it's not talent with Tay Banks. I'll tell you, it's not talent. It's not physical ability. It's not traits. It's none of that. It's mostly maturity. But the difference from last year to this year, like I said, last year you entered the year with Tay Banks looked at as the number one corner. And now he's looked at as the biggest question mark and a guy who might have competition for his starting job.
Wow. So
that to me is the difference. Drew Phillips, the slot corner they drafted out of Kentucky, terrific player. Paulson Adebo, truth be told, when I looked at the cornerback market in the offseason, he's the guy I thought the Giants should target because he was the youngest of the cornerbacks on the free agent market, guy with tremendous upside. So you're looking at a room that's vastly improved.
Let's stay in the secondary, Ed. ESPN has NFL Nation reporters that, obviously cover each and every team in the National Football League, including the Giants. And they did a joint story together this week where every reporter was tasked with picking the most surprising player on every team that sort of impressed them, but that they didn't have on the bingo card. And for the Giants, Jordan Renan had safety Dane Belton, and saying that he has, turned some heads throughout the spring activities here for the New York Giants. Is that a message that you would reiterate? Is that a message you would jump on that train? Or is there someone else that stands out in your mind in that department?
Belton, to me, has had a nice camp, all right, but Belton is at best for the Giants their third safety behind Javon Holland and second-round pick Tyler Nubin. Belton's a guy who he's been a little bit of a mystery to me, since the Giants drafted him in the fourth round a couple of years ago, because he finds the football. And yet, when he's on the field, he occasionally finds the football, but somehow the Giants don't put him on the field very often. So that they're telling you something in there about what they think of his play, down in and down out. So yeah, but Dane Belton has had a nice spring, but I think about 3 years ago, actually now, well, actually it's got to be 4 years. I'm getting old,
oh, wow.
guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Because Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll's first year as head coach, Daniel Jones, we're watching training camp, and it was like Darnay Holmes and Daniel Jones, Darnay Holmes being the slot corner for the Giants at that point in time. It's like they had the ball on a string. Every single day, Daniel Jones was throwing interceptions to Darnay Holmes, like over and over and over. And we thought, oh my God, Darnay Holmes is taking a big step forward and he's going to have an all-pro year in this and that and the other thing. And by the end of the year, Darnay Holmes wasn't even playing. And what we came to find out was, to make life hard on Daniel Jones in that first training camp, they were basically whispering the play in Darnay Holmes' ear and telling him where the ball was going. Okay. So it's like, okay, we're going to make this really hard on Daniel. We're going to force him into some turnovers. We're going to see how he deals with it. So Darnay Holmes looked great, but he looked great because he knew exactly where the ball was going.
It was by design.
It was by design.
I love it. Another position I actually am really excited about is the running back position for the Giants. I mean, obviously they have Tyrone Tracy coming back. Devin Singletary is on the roster as well. And then, of course, they've added Cam Scatterbo. Everybody's excited about him. But I want to talk to you about Turbo, Dante Miller. Is this a guy that's going to make this roster, and how exciting is this youngster?
He's a speed guy. He's got a ton of speed. And I wondered at times last year if the Giants would would bring him to the active roster, at least, to try to get him some use on kickoff returns, maybe in the screen game and things like that. And they never did. And I just don't know. When you look at Dante Miller's history, I think he played, I think it was Columbia where he played initially and then on to South Carolina. It's just been a long time now since Dante Miller. It's been he had 6 carries in 2022. And those are the last live carries in a game that counted that Dante Miller has had. So the kid might have talent and he's got tremendous speed, but it's been a long time since he's played real football, and he's got an uphill battle, with this running back group. I wonder, I honestly wonder. I don't know if there would be a market for him, but I wonder if they might look to try to move Devin Singletary for somebody like Miller or Eric Gray, as the third running back on the roster.
Speaking of trades, ESPN, I'm going back to them again. They proposed a final move for every team in the NFL. And some of them were simple, like for my Jets, hey, re-sign your own players and do that. But others were more aggressive. And for the Giants, the move was trade Kayvon Thibodeau because of all the different pass rushers you have. Some people have said do a NASCAR package and just go after teams. And others have said, you can flip them for an asset that you can use to reinvest to another part of the roster. Where are the Giants at in that department? Is that even a thought to potentially trade KT either before the season or maybe even ahead of the deadline?
Well, look, there's, sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. And it keeps coming up and it keeps coming up. And you have to wonder if at some point they might consider it. All right. Because they've got Kayvon for this year. They've got him on the 5th-year option for next year. And in the 5th-year option might actually, make him attractive to some other teams. But what I have said about this is, look, you drafted Carter, you have Burns, you have Thibodeau, you have Dexter Lawrence, you added some other veteran defensive linemen. You have all of these pieces. Why break it all up now before you get it on the field and see what it looks like? All right. I do wonder if Abdul Carter is what the Giants think he is. My guess as to how they're going to do this is they're going to move Abdul Carter all over the place. They're going to move Abdul Carter. They'll have him pass rush from defensive end. They'll have him pass rush from defensive tackle. They'll have him play a little bit of inside linebacker. They'll have him play on the outside, move guys around. And, maybe when Burns or Thibodeau's off the field, he'll be at the edge full time. But I just wonder if at some point, if Abdul Carter is what they think he's going to be, they'll want him on the edge full time. They'll want him where they drafted him to play full time. And that's the point where you wonder if they might trade Kayvon. But I look at Kayvon though, and it's hard for me because if you look at the history of edge defenders, defensive ends, edge defenders, how long did it take Michael Strahan to become a great pass rusher? 4 or 5 years. How long did it take Trey Hendrickson, who's led the league in sacks the last 2 years, I think, to hit double digits in sacks? He was in year 4 before he hit double digits in sacks. And it's hard for me. Kayvon Thibodeau is still 24 years old. He's still 24. So we've watched the Giants move on from Xavier McKinney. We've watched the Giants move on from Julian Love. We watched the Giants move on from Odell. We watched what happened last year with Saquon. They moved on from Leonard Williams a couple of years ago, thinking Leonard Williams was getting to the point where he was past his prime, not worth the big contract anymore. And Leonard Williams just had an all-pro season, the best year of his career. And I can't get past this thought that if they move on from Kayvon Thibodeau, they might do that and then watch him go play better football somewhere else than he played for the Giants. So, so that's a tough one for me. I get it, because theoretically you've got 3 guys for 2 spots, but it's not like Kayvon Thibodeau is a bad player either.
All right, one more spot I want to cover, Ed, and that's the wide receiver room. Obviously, Malik Nabers did not participate in minicamp, and a lot of the same names. Slayton's back again, Hyatt's back again, Wan'Dale Robinson's back again. So is this group any better? Has it matured? Give me your thoughts, because we're seeing a lot of the same names, and it hasn't been stellar production outside of Nabers there in his rookie year. Let's talk a little about that wide receiver room and whether it's any better or not.
Well, the Giants are counting on the quarterback room making it better. Okay. What the Giants theory is that the biggest issue wasn't the weapons they had on the outside. The biggest issue they had was the quarterback trying to throw the ball to those weapons. Malik Nabers is a tremendous player. Darius Slayton's a really good player. Wan'Dale Robinson, on my website, he gets a lot of grief, because he's about as small as you can be to play wide receiver in the NFL. He's kind of got T-Rex arms, and I mean, he basically, I think he's got the shortest arms in the NFL as far as wide receiver. And, he's a tiny target, but I think the Giants are counting on the quarterback play to take better advantage of the wide receivers. And they're also hoping that Jalen Hyatt will finally take a step forward, and maybe Russell Wilson and that deep ball that Russell Wilson is famous for throwing, will bring more out of Jalen Hyatt this year as well.
Just jumping on the wide receivers, this is where I'll finish up too. The curious case of Darius Slayton. He should write a book. So he's his 5th round pick, and then fans are like, wow, what a find we have with Darius Slayton. And then all of a sudden, Giant fans seem down on Darius Slayton. Maybe he's going to get traded. Oh, he gets a pay cut. Now he gets this big free agent contract. It's been a wild roller coaster with Darius Slayton on the New York Giants. Where, feel free to share any other, trips on that journey I missed. And now he seems like he's one of those guys in the room.
Well, it's so weird. You're right a little bit about the roller coaster with Slayton. I happened to be there. The first day of Slayton's rookie year, first day of minicamp. Mm-hmm. And he came to the NFL. He lasted until the 5th round in the draft because of the idea that he had cement hands, all right, that he couldn't catch the ball. He dropped everything. He dropped everything to the point where we were chuckling on the sideline going, well, that's why he was drafted in the 5th round. All right. And now he hardly ever drops the ball. He hardly ever drops the ball. He has worked and worked and worked, and now he's very reliable. But what I will tell you is I'm very surprised that Darius Slayton is still a New York Giant. At the end of the year, I thought Slayton was tired. I thought he was beaten down. He said at the end of the year, he said, it's been a long 5 years or 6 years or whatever it's been with the Giants. It's just been a long time, and it's been a lot of losing. And, and he looked beaten down. He looked ready, and he sounded ready to move on and try something else. And he was, as a free agent, in the offseason, I'm very surprised that Slayton ended up, re-upping with the Giants and coming back this year. I'm glad that he did, because that would have been a hole to replace. He's a good player. He's probably a better player at this point in his career than people give him credit for. And I think some of that has been due to the quarterback play and the offense he's had to deal with over the last couple of years. But like I said, I'm just surprised, because I thought he was ready to explore something else, and he came back. And I'm surprised by that. I think he's surprised by it a little bit too.
All right, he's our Giants insider, Ed Valentine from Big Blue View. I'll end it up with this one, Ed. And by the way, if you like this video, please click like and certainly subscribe to our YouTube channel at MC Show Digital. You see the click right below on the right-hand corner of your screen. All right, Ed, last one is about the coach and the GM. All right, Paul said it earlier. These guys might be on the hot seat here. It seemed like at the end of last season, they were on the hot seat. So how does that affect how they're going to manage this team this year, knowing that if it doesn't show, as John Mara said, progress, that they're not going to be here next year? How does that affect how the Giants operate this year with both their coach and their GM?
It's so hard because, John basically said, he was kind of wishy-washy. He said, I need to feel better at the end of the year, at the end of 2025 than I do right now.
Perhaps a cup of tea might do it.
And it's like, John, go have a shot, whatever, there you go. Have some tequila, whatever, but nobody knows exactly what that means. Okay. Nobody knows what that means. I mean, what's going to make you feel better? Are you going to feel good if you go 5-12, but Jackson Dart plays the last 4 games and it looks like he could be your guy going forward? Are you going to feel better if Jackson Dart never sees the field and you go 9-8 or 8-9 and barely miss the playoffs? What's the criteria? I don't know. What I do know is when we talked to Joe Shane during the offseason, his focus was entirely on 2025. He almost never mentioned anything beyond 2025. When they were rumored to be after Matthew Stafford, all he kept saying is, I just want the best quarterback for this football team for 2025. So their focus is on right now. And the flip side of that is they have Jackson Dart, who is a long-term development project, which they know. So it's hard because I think I mentioned it at the top of the show. It's 2 whole different tracks, and we don't know what's important to John Mara. Is it important that they don't go 4-13, or is it important that they look like they've developed a quarterback? What's important to him? So my guess would be I think Joe Shane is on a little safer ground than Brian Daboll. I really do. I think John Mara likes Joe Shane's process. I think he likes the drafts that have been put together the last couple of years. And I think we might get to the end of the year and John Mara might look at it and say, is Brian Daboll getting what he should be getting out of the talent that Joe Shane's giving him? And right now, how do we answer that question? It's a brutal schedule. Can they argue, well, 6 or 7 games is all we could have been expected to win with this schedule that we've got? So the criteria is just so muddy right now that we kind of have to get to the end of the year and see where it goes. But I know that the Giants are going to be really leery of putting Jackson Dart back into that spin cycle that they put Daniel Jones in.
2-parter to finish here, Ed. First off, do you think the Giants made it muddy on purpose of this sort of ominous nature of it's not playoffs or bust? If they make the playoffs, they're sticking. If they don't, that is very black and white. To leave it ominous and vague allows them, in theory, the Giants brass that's making this decision, the leeway to make that decision, say, whoa, we didn't say this or that. We gave ourselves full flexibility to make that decision. And the second part of that, what you just said in your answer, seems really interesting, that head coach and GM are not married, that there is a world where one survives and the other does not, that it's not just both live, both die. There's another world that we haven't given its full respect to as a legitimate possibility for Big Blue. Yes?
I think John Mara has always sort of made it muddy in terms of his coaching decisions, because he always seems to say, well, I'm not demanding the playoffs. I just want to feel better. I want to feel like we're making progress. I want to feel like we're pointed in the right direction. But what's the criteria for that? What does that have to look like? And the only and there's never really a definition for that. So I kind of think he always makes it muddy. And John has also said that he can separate the coach and the GM because they're different jobs. They're different responsibilities. Those two guys came in together. They make most of their decisions together. They're philosophically aligned and all of that. But I do think that John Mara is really hoping to avoid having to blow up the entire organization again, because you're blowing up the entire organization when you fire a GM. You're blowing up not only the coaching staff, you're blowing up the front office, you're blowing up the scouting staff, you're blowing up everything and starting completely over. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to do that, unless he absolutely feels like, if they go 0-17 and they have no choice.
So you're saying John Mara's gotten over the Saquon Barkley thing when it comes to Joe Shane? Is that what you're saying, Ed? You kind of are.
I think so. I don't think John Mara was never really not over it. I think he was okay with it. I just think he hated the fact that Saquon landed in Philly, and I think we all hate that, but it was never, to be honest with you, I think John knows this in his heart. It was never the right thing for the Giants to do unless you're being ruled by sentimentality. Business-wise and on the football field, it was never the right thing for the Giants to do, to give Saquon the kind of money, that the Eagles gave Saquon, because they're just not in the same place.
Yeah.
They're just not in the same place. They weren't going to be any better. They weren't going to be any better with Saquon than they were without him.
Right. So maybe part of this that people don't see, Ed, is that Saquon might not have been the Saquon he was last year in New York, because New York doesn't have the offensive line that Philly has. They don't have the players and the personnel that Philly has. So it might have been another good season, but not a great season. And by the way, he could very well have two more good seasons in the next two in Philly, and it just makes the Giants look worse and worse. But I think you're right to say, because I thought the same thing. I thought they shouldn't pay the running back, and they didn't. But when you have to watch it day in and day out, especially with your rival, it's a disaster. You can't change that.
Yeah, if I can say one more thing about Saquon.
Yeah.
Saquon is the best running back in football right now. He's probably the best running back in football since Barry Sanders. If you get him clean to the second level, if you get him 5 or 6 or 7 yards down the field, there's nobody better than he is. The Eagles can do that. The Giants couldn't.
Yeah.
All right. And they weren't going to be able to. If you get him clean to the second level, he's impossible to tackle. And he is now with a team that can get him there.
Yeah, I think it's good for him, not good for the Giants, though. And I hate watching it, Ed, just like I'm sure John Mara does as well.
Oh, I hear you.
It's not pretty.
No, it's not. It won't be pretty if Daniel Jones goes and has a Pro Bowl year for the Colts either. But
no.
But that's a whole nother can of worms.
We'll take our chances on that one. All right. Ed Valentine, as always, a pleasure having you. Thanks for joining us in our little digital space at MC Show Digital. By the way, if you like the video, click like. You can subscribe. All our social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, X, aka, all down on the bottom of our screen. Ed Valentine, thanks so much for the time today. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks for having me on the very first day of your digital experience. All right. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Ed.